Well, thank you everyone for this opportunity to be able to share some of my story. Over the last few years, I have had a longing to make climate justice more central and integrated to my various roles in both life and ministry, feeling that this focus really gets to the heart of all the deeply spiritual and systemic transformation called for in mending the world. The only problem was I didn't know where to start. I felt like I was on the outside and wanted to belong to that inner circle, so deeply engaged, but that I couldn't because I didn't have the credentials to adequately approach or have authority on such a vast topic. I wasn't on the front lines or a policy expert. I hadn't studied environmental science or done a doctorate in eco-theology. And then the opportunity to represent the United Church at COP25 became that entry point for me. Even leading up to the conference, my sense of belonging grew rapidly, connecting more deeply with our national church again in preparation sessions, and with our United Church partner, Climate Action Network Canada. I got to sit in on weekly preparation Zoom calls with members of civil society across our country. I found myself more motivated to learn as much as I could, to create inspiring liturgies, and to reach out into the community, including attending the Montreal Climate March with my children. I was the first of our United Church delegation to head to Madrid, and day one certainly had that wow factor. Entering through the high security into this huge convention center, an estimated 30,000 people gathering from all sectors of society across the globe. It was vibrant and with that buzz of anticipation after such a big year in the global call for action, and in the midst of raging fires, floods, and droughts. The opening plenaries with speeches by the Secretary General and different heads of state, especially from the most vulnerable countries, as well as youth representation, were passionate and strongly stated before negotiations got fully underway. Being part of the largest and most diverse Canadian civil society delegation, each morning we had the chance to meet together to debrief on the status of the negotiations between the political parties, in particular Canada's role in that context, as well as to share their insights and to encourage one another. And every day I also had the chance to attend numerous side event panels covering such a broad range of topics and hearing from such a broad range of voices. It was an amazing space for learning and connecting, especially to be witness to the powerful accounts of those on the front lines of the crisis. Another big highlight was gathering together as faith community with our ecumenical partner ACT Alliance each day to reflect, to pray, and to plan actions together. One of the most powerful moments for me was the afternoon that we actually brought our liturgy into the middle of the main hall of the conference center. It was heart work, as the climate statistics suddenly became real people in the telling of their personal stories, in the sharing in public prayer in the public space, and the power of singing together, from social gospel music to Teze chants, and in the collective call to action. Many conference participants rushing past actually found themselves turning to pause and to soak it in their own hearts connecting. And media was also present to ensure the impact of our liturgy traveled far beyond that conference hallway. The heart focus of faith groups in the climate movement is so not taken for granted and was so lifted up during my time at COP25. Several other civil society organizations wanted to interview us about what our presence meant to the movement. And in our interfaith capacity building sessions at COP, it was lifted up that we have to recognize the power we have at this pivotal time in history and to use how already well mobilized we are in local and global community relationships and in trusted leadership and that moral voice to speak truth through love and to help people make that personal connection, which science alone can't always do. It is in the building of relationships with each other and the rest of the creation and our practices of faith, especially to acknowledge the power of our liturgy that can truly help sustain hope and courage, especially as the huge challenges faced out in the world were being faced right inside the conference center. We saw that lived out. First of all, with the negotiations themselves, not at all reflecting the call of urgency right in their face, being blocked by so many of the powerful polluting countries every step of the way, and Canada itself making big plans for 2050, but then staying so vague about how it would actually get there. And realizing just how deeply the entrenched systems of power that have already been in place are, with even fossil fuel companies at the conference, both sponsoring it and lobbying while we were there, while meanwhile all Indigenous and youth voices that were supposed to be given a platform often had to protest just to maintain that discourse. And even our reminder as we met there that we were supposed to be in Chile, where the ongoing human rights violations continue to escalate. Some of those issues became even more heightened after I returned home, which Tony then would be able to speak more directly to. But on my final night at the conference, there was feeling once again of the power of the people, of the grassroots movement rising up as I marched with the interfaith group and 500,000 people in Madrid, similar to Montreal, holding our banners and singing our songs together. It was such a big high and that sense of powerful belonging. So returning home, intensity of heart is the phrase I use best to describe my experience. And it is being sustained by those relationships of belonging nurtured at COP25, with ongoing personal correspondences with friends around the globe and ongoing connections to committees and networks, one of the gifts of our technology and current social media age. 2020 is a big year, and we have that call to really empower people of faith to trust they can make a real difference. The global community is calling us to be key players and to help create those circles of belonging for everyone to feel their entry point and connection, to be able to sustain commitment and to trust in the power of our faith practices to transform hearts. So speaking of relationships, I'm grateful for my overlapping time with Tony there at the conference and the wisdom he brought to my experience and can now share with all of you. Tony, take it away.
Thank you. I think one of the things that, just following up on your information there, yes, the Chile location was important because they have not held a COP at one of the in the countries where these issues are most prevalent, and so we had a great amount of activism coming from the youth groups and from the representatives of Chile, talking about the inequity and the lack of control over resources, lack of control over their governance systems. And this is a common theme amongst Indigenous people, especially in Canada. And so following on this condition, going to Madrid, for me, was more of a spiritual journey, and looking at how we contend with the natural ends of that system of control, system of governance that teaches us that we are atomized communities within a larger whole controlled by a hegemonic group. And that, to me, is working from a position of disempowerment. And so looking at how the Indigenous groups were incorporated and lifted up in terms of the overall message of, oh, yes, we want to be inclusive of Indigenous voices, we want to be inclusive of Indigenous perspectives and traditional knowledge. There's not a lot of demonstration of that. So a lot of the efforts of the individual nations that were represented and the community groups from Indigenous countries, or countries that had Indigenous people, struggled to be heard, struggled to participate, struggled to find an outlet where their voice mattered. And I think that the type of system that we stepped into with the parliamentary system and the system of justice that is not being addressed, that we came from a position of being disempowered to that, to what we were called to be in that space. And I think that the church, in many ways, was the anchor that really helped the various voices to come to the fore. During that time, we had gone to a number of different sessions. We had gone with a number of different groups. One of the interesting things was the communities of faith coming together and talking and working together and speaking about strategies and what was going on, and their roles and their information that they were sharing in and amongst groups from different parts of the world and from different experiences, but all towards the same goal of environmental justice. And so with the daily meetings that we had, there was an opportunity there to express and to balance ourselves, that in a way that we were recognizing that the negotiators didn't have, and that various organizers didn't have. And so there was an opportunity there that the groups could offer in terms of a balancing or a reflective time for the people involved, but also that we were a legitimizing voice for those that were coming from different traditions. And so the particular group that I was involved with the various ACT Alliance members, came together with people from different faiths, different groups, from the Muslim community, from the Hindu community, from the Jewish and other areas, and met as almost a colony of nations with the Secretariat to talk about some of our prevalent issues and to show the depth of our understanding and how we participate in these types of endeavors and what is key to our ministries, but also what is key to our role within our communities, role within the world, role within the churches, and the various organizations that we come from. So to me, this showed that there is a leverage and a dignity and a consideration given to communities of faith and how they are participating honestly and with an integrity that will help to balance the needs of the activist community, the needs of the Indigenous community, the needs of all those that are coming to the forefront trying to be heard. In our parliamentary system, I think one of the things that that is problematic is that acquisition of space, is that delegation of empowerment to speak one's voice. When we look at even the format of the COP25 was in a large hangar type building with several huge room areas blocked off and various activities going on within each. And off to the side, completely apart from the entire event, was the Indigenous Pavilion, which was sort of a ramshackle, thrown together last minute area with very limited, it was actually built over time throughout that week. So I was there from the fourth day right up until the end. And in that time, they were still having problems with acoustics. They're still having problems with sound systems, still having problems with areas. And I went there and it looked just like a small hallway that they were doing their presentations in. And so there wasn't a lot of consideration, a lot of integrity to those spaces because people are not being involved. And one of the things that from the United Church we talk about and have talked about is the importance of Indigenous voices. And so at some of the talks that I gave, I talked about and I put online the information saying that from the Indigenous Church, what we talk about is, and what we've come to with the negotiation, with the adoption of UNDRIP, with the adoption of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, is the importance of that phrase, nothing about us without us. And that is something that we have fought for my reserve for 140 years. But at the same time, in these Latin communities, in the South Asian communities, where you have, and in Australia, where you have systems of that are more like apartheid, that are more like some governance systems that challenge and question the role of Indigenous people, the question that that willingly and forcefully annihilate groups, where you have this disjunction and you don't have the rights that we see that are being fought for in Canada. You don't have the recognition of UNDRIP worldwide in these communities. You don't have the recognition of even a way of promoting autonomy and pride and self-reflection in these communities, that it makes it even more challenging for them to get even to stage one, which I think the nothing about us without us states. And so it is a huge challenge that I think we need to continue to support and continue to work towards, because I think there is a value in the work that we do in those arenas and why we are participating. And as Wendy was saying, that notion of the power of the people, that spiritual, that political call, that way of standing up for collective rights, standing up for collectivity, and the efforts of the community to be involved in decision making, in governing, is a critical step, because that is a more inclusive way of building a balanced and stable society, rather than having it built from the top for the interests of those that benefit. And to take our teachings and apply them from our various denominations or from our various groups, to say that our lessons and the work that we do in our faith systems apply to the larger governance and how we work in the world, and how we balance the interests of one group over another, how we work together. So to me, it was a very productive time. And coming back, I've been able to talk to various groups and do various talks, and do another one tonight and doing another one tomorrow. So just continuously working through this. And I think that for us now, at the beginning of this decade, that we have 10 years that we've been saying in the environmental movement, and that in those 10 years, a broader, more active understanding, a way of being in the world is needed. And I think that that's part of the work that we're doing here, and part of the work that we want to be involved in for the future. And that's not just for us, but for those that come after us, that are very motivated to do something that will last and will address some of these core issues that have not been addressed before. So with that, I think that I had a very deep and fulfilling time doing this work. And it really motivated me to move on to other areas that will continue to do here in my work in Calgary, my work with the Stoney Nation, my work with the United Church here, and continue to be a voice that will help and promote the ideas of that environmental movement and the Indigenous rights that are critical to helping and maintaining a balance between what power systems are doing and how we engage with a larger group that can motivate whole societies. Thank you.